Imagine a world where money does not belong to banks. A world where you can send value to anyone on the planet without asking permission from a financial institution. No bank hours, no transaction approvals, no middlemen. Just you, the internet, and a digital form of money that anyone can use. That idea may sound radical, but that is exactly what Bitcoin introduced to the world. To understand Bitcoin, we need to go back to 2008. The global financial system was collapsing. Major banks were failing, governments were bailing them out, and millions of people were losing trust in the traditional financial system. Right in the middle of that chaos, a mysterious figure using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a 9-page document online. The document was titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. In simple terms, Satoshi proposed a new type of money that did not require banks to operate. Instead of trusting financial institutions to record transactions, the system would rely on cryptography, mathematics, and a network of computers distributed all around the world. In January 2009, the first Bitcoin block was created. This moment is known as the Genesis block. Embedded inside that block was a message referencing a newspaper headline about banks being bailed out. It was a subtle signal about the motivation behind Bitcoin, creating a financial system that does not rely on centralized institutions. So how does Bitcoin actually work? At the heart of Bitcoin is something called the blockchain. Think of the blockchain as a giant public ledger. A ledger simply records transactions. For example, when you send money to someone using a bank, the bank records that transaction in its internal system. But the key difference is that banks control their ledgers privately. Bitcoin does something completely different. Instead of one institution keeping track of transactions, the Bitcoin ledger is shared across thousands of computers worldwide. Every participant in the network holds a copy of the ledger. When a transaction occurs, it gets broadcast to the entire network and eventually added to this shared record. Transactions are grouped together into what are called blocks. Each block contains a list of recent transactions, and once a block is verified, it gets permanently attached to the previous block. This creates a chain of blocks, which is why the system is called the blockchain. But if there is no bank verifying transactions, who does the verification? This is where Bitcoin miners come in. Miners are individuals or organizations that run powerful computers to secure the network. Their job is to validate transactions and add new blocks to the blockchain. They do this by solving extremely complex mathematical puzzles. These puzzles require significant computing power and electricity to solve. The first miner to solve the puzzle earns the right to add the next block to the blockchain. As a reward for doing this work, the miner receives newly created Bitcoin along with transaction fees paid by users. This process is called mining. Mining plays a critical role because it ensures that the network remains secure and trustworthy. If someone tried to cheat the system by altering past transactions, they would need to redo the enormous amount of computational work behind every block in the chain. In practice, this would require more computing power than the rest of the global network combined, making it nearly impossible. Another key feature of Bitcoin is scarcity. Unlike traditional currencies, which governments can print whenever they want, Bitcoin has a fixed supply limit. The total number of Bitcoins that will ever exist is capped at 21 million. This limit is written directly into the code. New Bitcoin enters circulation through mining rewards. However, those rewards decrease over time through an event called the halving. Roughly every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin miners receive for adding a new block gets cut in half. When Bitcoin first launched, miners received 50 Bitcoin per block. Then it dropped to 25, then to 12.5, and today it is 6.25 Bitcoin per block. Eventually, around the year 2140, the final Bitcoin will be mined and no new coins will ever be created again. Because of this limited supply, many investors compare Bitcoin to gold. Gold is valuable partly because it is scarce and difficult to mine. Bitcoin follows the same principle, but in digital form. That is why people often call it digital gold. Another powerful element of Bitcoin is decentralization. Traditional financial systems rely on central authorities. Banks control transactions. Governments regulate currencies. Payment processors approve or deny transfers. In contrast, Bitcoin operates on a decentralized network where no single entity is in control. Thousands of independent nodes run the Bitcoin software and enforce the rules of the system. These nodes verify transactions, maintain copies of the blockchain, and ensure that everyone follows the same protocol. Because of this distributed structure, Bitcoin does not have a headquarters, a CEO, or a controlling authority. This design makes the network extremely resilient. Even if some computers go offline, the rest of the network continues to operate. Now let's talk about how people actually use Bitcoin. To interact with the Bitcoin network, you need something called a digital wallet. A wallet does not physically store Bitcoin the way a real wallet holds cash. Instead, it stores cryptographic keys. These keys prove that you own a certain amount of Bitcoin on the blockchain. One key is called the public key, which acts like your wallet address. You can share this address with anyone who wants to send you Bitcoin. The other key is called the private key, and it must be kept secret. Whoever controls the private key controls the Bitcoin associated with that wallet. If you lose your private key, the Bitcoin connected to it becomes permanently inaccessible. There is no bank customer service to recover it. This level of independence is one of Bitcoin's most powerful features. Users become their own bank. They control their own money without relying on financial institutions. Over the years, Bitcoin has grown from a small experiment used by a handful of programmers into a global financial phenomenon. Major investment funds, multinational companies, and even governments now pay attention to Bitcoin. Some people use Bitcoin as a store of value, similar to gold. Others use it for cross-border payments because transactions can move across the world without traditional banking systems. In countries experiencing high inflation or unstable currencies, Bitcoin has even become an alternative way for people to preserve their wealth. Of course, Bitcoin is not without challenges. Its price can be volatile. Governments are still figuring out how to regulate it, and the technology continues to evolve as developers improve scalability and efficiency. But despite these challenges, Bitcoin has already accomplished something extraordinary. It introduced the world to the concept of decentralized money. For the first time in human history, people can transfer value globally without needing permission from a central authority. Whether Bitcoin eventually becomes the dominant global currency or remains a powerful alternative financial asset, its impact on the world of finance is undeniable. Because Bitcoin did not just create a new type of money, it created a new way of thinking about trust, value, and financial freedom. And understanding Bitcoin today might be one of the most important steps in understanding the future of money. If you want to stay ahead in the world of finance and crypto, make sure you subscribe to Financrypt, where we break down complex financial ideas and turn them into knowledge you can actually use.